Moving on to our third panelist question. Mr. Coons, your question is going to Senator Cappiello.
Senator Cappiello, earlier this year, the federal government sent economic stimulus packages to American taxpayers, stimulus checks rather, I should say. There's a movement afoot for another round of economic stimulus checks. Do you support a second round of economic stimulus checks for taxpayers? And does supporting this measure constitute spreading the wealth, a phrase we've heard a lot this campaign season?
Well, again, the first thing I have to do is look at the details of what this package is. So they're talking about $300 billion. Now, I can't just look at a bill and say, yes, I support $300 billion. That would be irresponsible for me to do that unless I saw and read the details of that bill. But there was a first round of economic stimulus checks that went to people. And I will tell you this, I don't understand how one can support a one-time check of $300, $600, or $1,200. I think that's going to stimulate the economy. But on the other hand, vote for a permanent tax increase of $4,000 for the average filer in the 5th District in Connecticut. It doesn't make sense. Either you believe more money in your pockets means something and will help you, or you don't. I would like to see permanent tax relief for the people in this room and the middle class in this country, not simply a check. And I also think that it should be the people that are paying the taxes that get the tax money back. I don't believe in simply redistributing the wealth. That's not the right way to tax people. The way to tax people is to think about what services we need to provide to the citizens of our country. And then think about the fairest way to bring that money in without penalizing people for their success. Now, there have been many differences between the two of us in the state Senate. The business entity tax, which affects small business owners like my dad. He pays $250 a year for no reason whatsoever, for the sake of owning a business in Connecticut. Even if he loses money, he's paying that. I oppose that. My opponent supported that. The real estate conveyance tax increase. That hurts people, even if they lose money on the sale of their home. My opponent supported that increase. I oppose it. The nursing home bed tax that my opponent created and crafted to pass along $5,000 per year for anyone who pays for a nursing home bed. I oppose, my opponent supported that. We clearly are different on how we oppose whose money your money belongs to, you or the government.
I think you'll hear today Senator Cappiello talk about a lot of things that he's voted against, and he's right. Most every important measure that's come before the state legislature, Senator Cappiello has voted against, many of them. We'll talk about budgets today, we'll talk about the stem cell legislation. It's easy to be against things, but let's talk about what we're for here. Let's talk about the actual record, the facts on what's happened in Washington, in Congress over the last 2 years. $300 billion in tax cuts for individuals, $44 billion in new tax cuts for small businesses. Not a single tax increase. This sort of Republican talking point that comes from the Republican National Committee about the largest tax increase in history is made up. If you ask Senator Cappiello on the way out which tax he's talking about and how much it's been increased, what that will result in on your filings next year, he won't be able to tell you because it doesn't exist. It's based off of some non-binding resolution passed by the United States Congress. So let's talk about those specific numbers. $44 billion in tax cuts for small businesses, $300 billion for individuals. I think that record is a real one, and I think it points to what the direction should be going forward regarding an economic stimulus package. We need to look at next year, as we come back into Congress, that same type of revenue relief for small businesses that are going to grow the next wave of an economy. Let's focus in on giving tax breaks to Americans, middle-class Americans, who are going to be the basis of our economy going forward. And let's look at some strategic investments. I'm not necessarily sure it's going to make sense to hand checks to people that might benefit the economy in the short term when we really have long-term economic foundational questions to grapple with. But let's look at something like infrastructure funding. Right here in Danbury, one of the greatest impediments to growing our economy here is the fact that a lot of our mobility, both in people and goods, are trapped by our lack of rail infrastructure to and from New York, the highways that get clogged up far too often as we go east and west and north and south from here. I think it does make sense to make some targeted infrastructure investments, which unlocks a lot of our frozen economy, but also puts people to work building those roads and bridges.
30-second rebuttal.
Thank you. I didn't hear any specifics there either, Congressman Murphy, but let me just give you a quote from one of your colleagues, freshman Democrat, Bill Foster of Illinois, who called your vote on repealing the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts by letting them expire. He said, and I quote, "It raises taxes on the middle class. It's an average tax increase of $4,000 for the average filer in the 5th District by letting them expire." True, it's not happening now. It's happening after the next Congress is sworn into office.
Right, it's happening after the next
I'm sorry,
Congress is-
are we going back and forth?
Yes, it's 30-second rebuttal for Congressman Murphy.
Right, it is happening after the next Congress is sworn into office. The vote hasn't taken place yet. What you're referring to is some resolution that came before Congress setting 5-year budget parameters. That question has yet to come before the United States Congress. Now, do I think that we should be reauthorizing another $16 billion in tax cuts for the oil companies? No, I think that can be better spent on families. I think there's going to be some tax cuts that we've given to some industries that we're going to have to take a look at. And frankly, I think I outlined a pretty clear specific in terms of putting investments into our infrastructure that I think would be of great benefit to the people here in the city of Danbury and the surrounding communities.